A lot of men look at that blank space ahead and they see emptiness. They see decline, they see the fade. But an explorer looks at a blank space on a map and he sees something else entirely. He sees territory. This is Against the Fade, a podcast for men who refuse to fade midlife, and I'm Jonathan. It's November 1912, and Theodore Roosevelt has just been destroyed at the polls. This is a man who was once the youngest president in American history. A man who charged up San Juan Hill, built the Panama Canal, and stared down monopolies. For nearly 8 years, he was the most powerful man on earth, and now he's 55 years old, overweight, and a punchline. His own party abandoned him, the press mocked him, and his friends stopped returning his calls. So what does he do? He goes to Brazil. He accepts an invitation to lead an expedition down a river that nobody has ever mapped. A river so unknown, so uncertain, that the Brazilians named it the River of Doubt. No GPS, no satellite phone, no rescue team on standby, just dugout canoes, a small crew, his 23-year-old son Kermit, and a Brazilian explorer named Rosen, who knew the jungle but had never seen the river before. Roosevelt called it his last chance to be a boy, and what followed nearly killed him. The rapids destroyed their canoes, their supplies ran out, and tropical disease tore through the group. One man drowned, another murdered a fellow crew member and disappeared into the jungle. Roosevelt gashed his leg on a boulder. That wound became infected, and the fever got so bad, he told his son to leave him behind and save the rest of the team. 3 men died on that river. Roosevelt lost a quarter of his body weight, and he never fully recovered. The damage to his body from that expedition followed him the rest of his life, and he was dead within 5 years. But the thing of it is, he went. At 55, broken, humiliated, with nothing left to prove to anyone, he chose the River of Doubt over a quiet fade into retirement. Now, of course, I'm not telling you to go find an uncharted river in the Amazon. That's not the point. The point is the decision. The point is that a man who had already done more than most of us will ever do looked at the rest of his life and decided that comfort wasn't enough, that safety wasn't the goal, that there was something in him, something that had been there his whole life, that needed to move toward the unknown. And here's the question I want to sit with you for the rest of this episode. When was the last time you moved towards something you couldn't see the end of? When was the last time you chose the unfamiliar over the routine? Not a vacation you researched for 3 months on TripAdvisor, not a trail you downloaded on All Trails with every turn marked in advance. When was the last time you went somewhere, did something, tried something, where you didn't know what was going to happen next? Because most of us stopped doing that. Somewhere between 30 and 45, we stopped, and we barely noticed. And that's what this episode is about. There's a book I've been reading by a writer named Rosen. It's called The Extinction of Experience. And there's a line in that book that I read, and it made me have to put the book down for a second. She writes that more and more, we relate to our world through information about it, rather than direct experience with it. So sit with that for a second, because I think she just described how most of us are living. And I'm including myself in this. I'm not standing on the outside of it pointing fingers. I've got a phone full of saved trails I've never hiked. I spent entire evenings watching guys on YouTube do things I keep telling myself I'm going to do next month. I live in Utah. I'm surrounded by some of the most stunning wilderness on the planet. But there are a lot of weekends where the closest I get to it is scrolling past a photo of it on Instagram. So when I say this is happening to us, I mean us, me and you. Think about the last trip you took. Before you went, you probably watched YouTube videos of the destination, you read reviews of every restaurant, you downloaded a map with every trail pre-marked, color-coded by difficulty, with the ratings from 10,000 strangers. By the time you actually showed up, you had already experienced the place, or at least you thought you had. You experienced a version of it. A curated, filtered, 5-star rated version that someone else packaged for you. And then you got there, and you spent half the time taking pictures to show people that you were there. That's what Rosen was talking about. We've replaced experience with information about experience. We've replaced doing with watching other people do. We watch a guy fish on YouTube instead of going fishing. We save a hiking trail to a list we'll never open. We research a camping trip for 6 months and never book it. We consume other men's adventures from the couch and somehow convince ourselves that that counts. And it doesn't. Rosen argues that technology has made everything feel like an engineering problem. Lonely? There's an app. Bored? There's a feed. Want to see the Grand Canyon? Here's a 4K drone video. You don't even have to get in the car, and the thing is, it works. It scratches the itch just enough that you don't feel the loss. You don't notice that something is slowly going extinct inside you. What's going extinct is the part of you that was built by direct experience. The confidence that comes from doing something hard with your own hands, the humility that comes from failing at something new and realizing you don't know as much as you thought. That feeling of being fully alive because you have no idea what's coming next and you're in it anyway. That stuff doesn't come from a screen. It never has. It comes from contact. Skin on rock, feet on trail, cold water, hot sun, the weight of a pack, the sound of a place that has no Wi-Fi. You can't download that. You can't stream it. You have to go get it. And here's what this has to do with everything we've been talking about on this show. I've spent 7 episodes now talking about the fade. The physical valley, the social valley, the mental valley. The slow decline that happens when a man stops paying attention. And I think what Rosen is describing is the mechanism. This is how the fade works. Not with a dramatic collapse, not with one bad day. It works by substitution. One evening on the couch instead of outside, one more weekend where you meant to go but you didn't. One more year of someday that never becomes today. And slowly, so slowly you don't even notice, your world gets smaller. The commute, the desk, the screen, the routine repeat. In episode 6 we talked about Arthur Brooks and the idea that the second half of life is where wisdom lives. Where you take everything you learn and everything you've been through and you synthesize it into something deeper. But here's the catch that Brooks would agree with. Wisdom requires raw material. You can't synthesize experiences you've never had. If you stop feeding the machine, if you stop putting yourself in situations where you see something new, feel something new, get humbled by something new, then the wisdom engine has nothing to work with, and it stalls. That's the mental valley. That's where purpose goes to die. Not in some dramatic crisis, in the quiet narrowing of a life that used to be wider. But Rosen ends her book with something that matters. She says extinction is not inevitable, it's a choice, which means the opposite is also a choice. So if the explorer instinct goes extinct, if we let it, the obvious question is, does it have to? And the answer is no. Because there are men who refused. And I already told you about Roosevelt. 55, humiliated, chose the river anyway. But he's not the only one. There's a couple more stories I want to tell you now. And I think they're important because they prove something. They prove the instinct to explore, to move toward the unknown, to put yourself in situations where you don't control the outcome. It doesn't have an expiration date. I already told you about Roosevelt. 55, humiliated, chose the river anyway. But he's not the only one. And the stories I want to tell you now are more important because they prove something. The instinct to explore, to move toward the unknown, to put yourself in situations where you don't control the outcome, it doesn't have an expiration date. It doesn't retire when you do. It just gets buried, under mortgages, under meeting invites, under the gravitational pull of a life that's comfortable enough to keep you from asking whether comfortable is really what you want. The first man I want to tell you about is Reignite Fiennes. If you haven't heard of him, the Guinness Book of World Records called him the world's greatest living explorer. He was the first person to reach both North and South Poles by surface travel. The first to cross Antarctica entirely on foot. But here's what matters for this conversation. He summited Everest at 65, and at 59, he ran 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. Now he's 81, and he has Parkinson's, but he's still planning expeditions. Here's the detail that most people miss. He didn't do any of it alone. His wife Jenny was his partner and collaborator on nearly every major expedition for 30 years until she died in 2004. His crews are volunteers, not hired guns, men and women who came back again and again for decades because the mission mattered and the brotherhood was real. Fiennes is proof that the explorer instinct doesn't die with age. But he's also proof that no explorer goes alone. You need a crew. You need people who will walk with you into the unknown. The second man I want to tell you about you've probably never heard of. His name is Walt Blackadar. He was a doctor in Idaho, middle-aged, a little overweight. He spent most of his adult life hunting and fishing, but in his mid-40s, he and a friend rented a rubber raft and ran some rapids on the Salmon River. Then something clicked. He started kayaking. By 1971, he did something that changed the sport. He ran the Turnback Canyon on the Alsek River in Alaska. It's a walled-in stretch of grade 5 white water that had never been attempted. People said it was impossible. But a pudgy, middle-aged doctor proved them wrong. He ended up on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Blackadar didn't start young. He didn't have a sponsor or a training program. He was a regular guy who decided that the second half of his life was going to look different from the first. And it did. Now here's the pattern I want you to see across all 3 of these men. None of them explored because everything was going great. Roosevelt was humiliated. Fiennes kept pushing after losing his wife. Blackadar was restless in a life that was perfectly fine on paper, but not enough in his gut. Exploration wasn't their escape from hardship. It was their response to it. And the way they explored touches every valley we've talked about on this show. Their bodies were the vehicle. Roosevelt nearly died because his body couldn't handle the jungle at 55. Fiennes summited Everest because he trained his body to carry him there at 65. Blackadar needed the strength and the reflexes to survive grade 5 rapids. You can't explore if your body won't carry you. That's the physical valley. And none of them went alone. Roosevelt had his son Kermit and Rondon. Fiennes had Jenny and 50 years of volunteer crews. Even Blackadar needed the river community that taught him to paddle. Brotherhood isn't just friendship, it's the expedition team. That's the social valley. In every one of them surrendered control to something bigger than themselves. The river, the mountain, the ice. They planned, they prepared, but at some point they had to let go and trust that the mission mattered even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. That's the mental valley. And for those of you who heard episode 7, that's the faith conversation. That's letting go of the grip. The instinct is still in us. It didn't leave. We just stopped using it. So if the instinct is still there, how do we wake it up? I want to start by telling you something that happened to me, because I think it's the clearest way I can explain what I mean when I say direct experience changes you in a way that information about experience never will. In 2019, I signed up for a 7-day field expedition with a place called BOSS, Boulder Outdoor Survival School. It's the oldest wilderness survival school in the world. It's been running courses in southern Utah since 1968. And their whole philosophy comes down to 4 words: no more, carry less. On a BOSS field course, you don't bring a tent, you don't bring a sleeping bag, no stove, no backpack, no GPS, no phone. You carry a knife, a poncho, a wool blanket, and the clothes on your back. That's it. Everything else you either make, find, or do without. I'd always enjoyed camping in the outdoors, but I'd also been the guy who thought he needed all the gear to spend the night outside. The right pack, the right boots, the right headlamp, the right app to tell me exactly where the trail goes and what the weather's going to do in 45-minute increments. I'd convinced myself that the gear was what made the experience possible. And BOSS showed me that it was actually getting in the way. The first time I found water on my own in the backcountry, something shifted. It sounds small, but it's not. When you're thirsty and tired and there's no Nalgene full of filtered water waiting for you, and you have to read the terrain and find it yourself, that moment when you kneel down at a creek and fill your bottle, it changes the way you understand your relationship to the world. You're not consuming the outdoors anymore. You're participating in it. First time I made fire with the bow drill, the same thing. No lighter, no matches, just a spindle, a fireboard, and your own effort. And when that tinder bundle catches and you're holding the fire in your hands, fire that you made, you realize 2 things at once. First, that you could survive if you had to. And second, how much you take for granted. That first course, it pulled me back. And in 2022, I went back for the 14-day hunter-gatherer expedition. More primitive, more demanding, and very little food and water provided. And on that course, something happened that I think about all the time. I was standing in a shallow river, completely still, and there's a technique for catching trout with your bare hands called tickling. It's prohibited in most waterways, but BOSS has a special permit. The idea is that you become so still, so present, so much a part of the water that the fish swims into your hands. You can't force it, you can't chase it, you have to wait. You have to let it come to you. And then the second you feel it, every reflex has to fire at once or it's gone. I caught a trout with my hands, and after days of going without much food, the connection I felt to that meal was unlike anything I've experienced eating something I bought at a store or ordered from a menu. I caught it, I prepared it, I ate it, and every step of that process was direct, physical, and mine. That's what Christine Rosen is talking about when she describes what's going extinct. Not just nature, experience itself. The raw, unmediated, you were actually there kind of experience that no video, no app, no algorithm can replicate. Now, I'm not telling you to go catch fish with your hands. I'm not telling you to sign up for a survival course, although if that sounds like something, BOSS is 5 hours from Salt Lake City and it'll change your life. What I am telling you is this. You need to do something with your body in the real world that you've never done before, and you need to do it without a script. There's a British adventurer named Alistair Humphreys. National Geographic named him their Adventurer of the Year, and he coined a term that I love, Microadventures. Short, simple, cheap, local adventures for people with real lives. His point is that you don't need to cross Antarctica to be an explorer. You need to cross your own threshold. You need to walk out your front door and go somewhere you've never been. And it doesn't have to be outdoors. Here's the test. Does it require you to show up in person? Is it genuinely unfamiliar? Is there a real chance you'll be uncomfortable or fail? If the answer to all 3 of those is yes, that's an expedition. It might be small, but it's real. Walk into a boxing gym for the first time at 48 and tell them you want to learn. Sign up for a blacksmithing class where you're working with a forge and an anvil, making something with your hands. Drive 2 hours in a direction you've never driven. No GPS, just a paper map and curiosity. Go to a restaurant alone where you can't read the menu and order by pointing. Sit in on a faith tradition that isn't yours, not to convert, just to listen. Take your kids somewhere neither of you has ever been and figure it out together. None of those require a plane ticket or a survival school, but every single one of them requires presence, unfamiliarity, and the willingness to not know how it ends. That's the explorer gene. And that's the thing we've let go dormant. And here's my challenge to you. Summer's right around the corner. Before Labor Day, do one thing you've never done. Go one place you've never been. Have one experience you can't research your way through in advance. Don't film it, don't post it, just go, show up, and see what happens. And then when you get home, pay attention to how you feel, because I promise you, it won't feel like scrolling, it won't feel like watching someone else do it, it'll feel like yours, because it is. The first half of a man's life comes with a map. Somebody drew it for you, or you drew it based on what everybody else was doing. You go to school, get the job, find the wife, buy the house, have the kids, climb the ladder, and most of us followed it well. That's not a failure, that's the first summit. But somewhere around 40, 45, the map starts to run out. The career levels off or changes direction, the kids start needing you differently, the body reminds you it's not 25 anymore, and a lot of men look at that blank space ahead and they see emptiness, they see decline, and they see the fade. But an explorer looks at a blank space on a map and he sees something else entirely. He sees territory. Roosevelt didn't go to the Amazon because he had a plan. He went because his old plan was finished and he refused to stop moving. Fiennes didn't summit Everest at 65 because it was on some checklist. He did it because the man doesn't know how to sit still when there's something he hasn't seen yet. Blackadar didn't start kayaking in his 40s because he had some midlife crisis. He started because something in him woke up and said, there's more. The second half of your life is the river of doubt. Nobody's charted it for you. There's no all trails pin, there's no 5-star review, there's no algorithm that can tell you what's around the next bend. And that's not a threat, that's an invitation. In episode 6, I said the first summit was youth. The second summit is the one you choose. Exploration is how you choose it. Not by sitting in a chair and thinking about it. By moving, by going, by putting your boots on dirt you've never stood on and seeing what happens. And here's what I've learned. The fade doesn't happen because life gets hard. Hard is not the problem. The fade happens when we stop moving into the unknown, when we stop training our bodies for what's next, when we stop showing up for the men who would walk with us if we asked, when we stop believing there's something worth finding beyond the next ridge. The extinction of experience is a choice. Christine Rosen said that, and she's right. But so is the opposite. Choosing to stay curious, choosing to stay uncomfortable, choosing to walk into something you can't see the end of, that's also a choice. And it's available to every single one of us right now, today. We don't need an uncharted river. We don't need a mountain. We need a willingness to draw a map that doesn't exist yet and then follow it. My name is Jonathan. This is Against the Fade. Don't fade.